Why he did that? Shout out to television, man.
So I'm originally from Kaiser, Oregon. I started playing basketball at 2 years old. Dad put the basketball in my hands. From Larry Bird hoop that was like 6 feet tall, messing around, entertaining my family, making baskets on that, all the way to following my dad around the city, going to his city league games. He had a passion for the game. It just slowly started to wear off on me, and then he even coached me through middle school, played high school, every level. But yeah, originally I was, all in Kaiser, Oregon at 2 years old, started playing the game. By about 5th grade, I knew that I was actually in love with the game of basketball, and I was invested at that point really heavily. So I was trying to make the NBA from very young. But I would say from a professional standpoint, I started playing on the AND1 mixtape tour when I was 18 years old. And really, I went up, initially when I went up to try out to play against the AND1 team, I was just trying out for that one night. It wasn't something that I foresaw as a career. So the fact that they wanted me to come on tour with them was like an incredible bonus, and I was more than hyped because that was sort of a dream come true within itself. But going through that whole summer in 2003, winning a nationwide contest on ESPN to be signed to AND1 the company and be on the AND1 mixtape team, that was even more of a dream come true. And that's when I realized, like, okay, this potentially is my career. Signing with AND1 in August of 2003 was definitely one of the best experiences of my life and kind of paved the way for my professional career. Throughout the course of my career, I've actually been with 3 companies. So I was signed to AND1, which birthed my entire career. We had a TV show on ESPN for 7 seasons. Definitely a blessing. And then from there, I was contracted to Ball Up. It went for about 5 years. And I was on Fox Sports. It was a blessing. It was cool. And then currently, I'm actually touring with Court Kings. And I even recently just started my own company. So I'm excited what the future will bring in 2018, but I'm gonna wait to make those announcements. We've got a lot coming. So AND1 and Ball Up, 2 different entities, A lot of people thought that AND1 just switched to Ball Up because it had a lot of the same players and it was sort of the same style of play, but AND1 was actually started by 4 guys from the East Coast, and they were really in on the street ball market. They knew basketball, they knew grassroots marketing, they knew what they were doing from a branding standpoint, very well put together. Ball Up was a different entity, but carried a lot of the same players in an effort to pick up where AND1 left off, and that was actually West Coast based, so that was here in LA. So definitely 2 different entities. The reason that AND1 went off ESPN was not because the people, well, see, here's the thing, the market never rejected AND1. AND1 was taken off the market, that was their own choice, but here's what happened. In 2006, the company was actually bought out by a different entity. And when it was owned, when it was under different ownership, that's the same thing as it's like a team. It's like you have a coach, and then that coach gets fired, and then you have a new coach come in, and he runs shop completely different. So that's what happened with AND1. When the new owners came in 2006, they had a whole different vision for things. And from my understanding, they weren't as up on street ball and how that actually built the brand. So they chose to go a different route, and they wanted to market NBA, and I believe that AND1 only had 2 years left, either on their deal with ESPN or the production company, I'm not quite sure. So we did the tour for 2 more years up until 2008, and then when that ended, they switched all their marketing to go a completely different way, and overnight you didn't see it on ESPN anymore, and there was no real announcement or story as to why you didn't see it. And social media wasn't as prevalent then, so there was nobody really speak out about it and sort of explain and put context as to why it wasn't going anywhere. So that's what happened with AND1, is like it was self-taken off the market. The market never rejected it. So there was always a market for it. I think with street ball there's always a market for it because it emphasizes the highlights. It's like highlight-driven basketball. And when you watch a game, the moments that you get excited for, the dunks, the alley-oops, the crossover, crazy moves, that's what street ball tries to put to the forefront and do actually much more during a game. Throughout my career, I've been blessed. I've been able to travel the world to over 40 countries. Some of my favorite spots in recent years, I love Costa Rica, a lot of Central America. Australia is really nice. I love going to Asia just because I love the fan show from a basketball standpoint. So I had a lot of influences. The few people I credit mostly, obviously my dad, put the basketball in my hands at 2 years old. But then I would say by the time I was in 5th grade, I actually started working with a personal trainer, and he was the one who helped me to plant the foundation for all my ball handling stuff. So that was key. From the first move he taught me was the in and out crossover. Then he taught me the Allen Iverson crossover, and it just went from there. But I was labeled as like the white kid with handles in my city by the time I was only in 6th grade. Like I had mastered a whole bunch of moves. So that was my gift from God, was being able to emulate things and pick up things really fast, and then to be able to entertain people with the game. From a pro basketball standpoint, I was a big Michael Jordan fan. Obviously being born in the 80s, I watched his whole run in the NBA, and then Allen Iverson was actually the first player who I tried to mimic my game off verbatim, because he was a small player playing amongst bigger guys in the league, and he played with a lot of heart. And so I really admired that style of play, and I was just inspired by him. The Spider-Man basketball series doing as well as it did definitely came as a surprise. Initially, my friend Robert Monroe and we were trying to come up with a concept that could go viral for YouTube to try to take the view count to another level, because I had decent viewership on my videos at that point, but I didn't have a lot of videos that were in the millions. So he was really up on cosplay and the sort of like Comic-Con world and that whole thing. And I didn't know much about it at the time, to be honest. But his thought was like, hey, how do we combine that with basketball and make it cool and funny? And then from there, we kind of decided to do the Spider-Man suit, because it covers every part of the body, and it could be like prank style, because you wouldn't actually know who was in the Spider-Man suit playing ball if you saw the video. So that was the idea, just to go do a prank, have some fun. We filmed it one afternoon, and by the time we got back, it was later in the evening. I edited it real fast, threw it up, and it actually didn't even fully upload by the time I woke up in the morning. But here's the thing, I had to catch a flight to Chicago. So I just left it uploading, left the computer on. By the time I actually got to LAX, it already had like 300,000 views. And then by the time I actually landed in Chicago, it had 3 million views the first day. And then I think by the end of the week, it was like 7 million, and just kind of went from there. But then, being that happened, people were waiting on a part 2. So instead of parlaying it as just Spider-Man playing basketball every time, we thought it would be cool to do something a little innovative and to make it sort of a video comic book, where obviously Spider-Man doesn't fight, but plays basketball instead, and then there's sort of like a story around it. So I think that was a great choice on Rob's part in making it something that generated interest long term, as opposed to just playing basketball every time. But it definitely came as a surprise. It was definitely a blessing, because then it took my digital platform to a whole new level, which is now obviously a full-time business, and it's been great. It's a blessing. And basically what we do is we cover all the events I do year-round, so that's just a part of it. And a lot of people, they'll approach me on the street and they'll be like, so you just hoop for a living? Like, that's incredible. And I'll say, you know what, it is incredible, and it's definitely a blessing, but that doesn't mean there's no grind that goes along with it. You know what I mean? So what people wouldn't take into account with what I do, and like the whole grind process that goes behind that, is the early flights, the late nights, trying to finish up work. You might do a whole week and hit 3 cities and hardly get any rest. By the time you get home, you might want to sleep for like 2 days straight, because you've just been through it. So there's a lot of grind work that goes into it. I would say international travel is another grind that people don't see. 15-hour flights. Sometimes you don't always get the greatest meal that you would want. Let's say you're in a foreign country and all they got to eat is some weird meal that you would never eat for breakfast, or whatever the case may be. Stuff like that you don't even think of. Also on the flip side is like all the work that went in to be able to get to this point. You know what I mean? God gave me the gift of basketball and entertaining people with the game, but here's the thing. All he does is he plants a seed. That doesn't mean you're not accountable to nurture it. You know what I mean? And what is your nurturing process? That's your practice, your dedication. Are you working out away from the court? Are you working out on the court? How much time are you invested? So even still to this day, I still work on my game quite a bit, and it's a grind, man. I take this stuff very seriously. People also don't see the branding strategy that goes into it, even producing video projects like this. You know, there's a lot of grind work that goes in just to bringing this interview we're doing right here to fruition. So imagine doing like a whole web series where now you got to cast people, you got to lock down location. Okay, how's the sound? You got sound people, you got lighting people, equipment, you know, all that stuff people don't look into. But end of the day, I'd say it's a blessing, but I definitely would never not tell somebody that it's not a grind too. I got so many favorite players that I played with, guys that I admired and watched growing up. So, you know, initially, AND1 Mixtape Tour, I watched Skip to My Lou, Hot Sauce, AO, Main Event. These guys were very influential for me as a youth. So to get to play with them early on in my career was like incredible. So a lot of the original AND1 players were guys that I already were fans of. And then later, I got to play with my longtime teammate and friend, the Bone Collector, who I loved his game as well. I actually saw him play at Rucker Park on DVD when I was in high school. And so getting to be his teammate starting in 2009 all the way up until just a couple of years ago was incredible. And one of the games that was actually very influential for me was actually getting to play with Allen Iverson in 2012. You know, him being my favorite player, the first player that I ever tried to emulate, to be on tour with him and get to play on his team for 3 straight games, that was definitely a blessing. I never played in a lot of the summer pro leagues. The reason I was never on the summer pro circuit most of my career was because I toured all summer. And then later on in my career, I actually toured year round. For me, my busiest time has always been during the summer, whether I'm going overseas, whether we had a summer tour here in the States, or wherever it may be. So that was never my grind, to be honest. You know, that's mostly for the traditional pro setup to where you're off during the summer and you're trying to get some good running. To the fans, I would just say, first off, thank you guys for supporting. I feel blessed to be in the position I'm in, and that, you know, I feel like what I'm doing right now, I'm following my God-given passion. And I would say that for everybody watching this, that God has given you a passion and a purpose as well, and it can be found in Jesus Christ. You know, in the new millennial age, I think being a YouTube hooper will actually be something that a lot of people do, whether that's on a professional level or whether that's just amateur, meaning just going out playing street ball, putting your videos on YouTube. But I would say, before worrying about the branding of it, I would say put in the work. You know what I mean? Because I think now in the digital age, a lot of people are skipping the work that needs to be put in and then trying to immediately start branding something that's not nurtured up to its full potential. You know what I mean? So if you wanted to be a YouTube hooper or a street ball player or whatever you want to call it, I think it would just be important to master the craft. You know what I mean? And when I say master the craft, that's very vague, but what I mean is, you know, if a large audience is into what you got going on, you probably got something special. You've probably mastered certain elements of the craft. So I'd say work on mastering the craft and then worry about the branding later. If you're just strictly talking about doing something that's not, you know, sport driven, then I would say I would encourage people to get on YouTube right away and try to follow their dream. But, you know, the key is just being consistent and trying to produce the highest quality content they possibly can on the regular. I was blessed because I found my passion when I was young. You know what I mean? I fell in love with it. So a lot of times what you like and what you're drawn to and what's your natural passion and inspiration, that's actually where your purpose is found. So that would be my advice to the kids who admire what I do and want to follow in the same footsteps.